Afternoon, Cherries fans, and welcome to this latest show here on Up the Cherries in all departments. Now, of course, we are in June, in the middle of the summer, and therefore it's boiling hot outside. It's lovely weather. However, there's not much football happening. So, what we wanted to do was have a look at last season, but also look at Gary O'Neill and the fantastic job that he's done, but also some of the stick that he got on social media platforms. We also wanted to have a look at the players that have left the club, also the players that were on loan, and what the future may hold. Can we better our position from last season? So, there is one man that is a regular on this show now. He does do reporting for Sky Sports, and that man did put out a tweet after that Leeds game with regards to Gary O'Neill. So it is a pleasure to welcome onto the show again, Mark McAdam. Welcome back, Mark. How you doing, mate?
Welcome back. The season's barely finished, and we're already starting to focus on next season's campaign. But all good. Thanks, Craigie.
Yeah. Thank you so much again as well for coming on, mate. And it's a pleasure as always to have you on. So it was an eventful season last year. And I think one thing that we should mention firstly, because I had throughout the season dog's abuse, to be perfectly honest, for my backing of Gary O'Neill. And do you know what? Full credit to you for what you put out on Twitter that day about the situation. Was it something that was planned for a little while, or did you have it in the arsenal as soon as we secured safety?
I didn't have anything written. I didn't have anything planned as such. I'd felt for a number of months that some of the criticism was unfair. And I was seeing stuff on social media that was very unlike what I've seen in the past from Bournemouth fans. We're a small community club. We're together. There's a great, set of supporters there that have been through so much off the pitch as well as on it. We've got those moments in history where the club was teetering on the edge, and that's brought us closer together. And I just saw a lot of things that I just thought were unfair. And, I just thought, hang on a second, we just need to be a little bit more supportive and a little less criticism headed towards his direction. Let's take a step back from the situation. We all want the team to be successful, but let's judge Gary in better circumstances. Yeah. And so I said what I said. Some people liked it. Some people didn't like it. Some people thought it was aimed at specific. It wasn't aimed at people that want to criticize the manager's formation or team selection or tactics. It was aimed at the nastiness and the horrible pictures and the campaigns and the other things that were just unfair and the targeted abuse towards his family and so on and so forth. That's not fair. That's not right. And that needed to be called out, in my opinion. And as I say, if someone got offended or upset by it, then they clearly didn't get where it was coming from. So I just think it's one of those things. It's easy to sit here now and talk about Gary O'Neill being a great manager and doing a great job. Yeah. Because he's kept the team in the Premier League. At the time, he was up against it. And that's where I feel that the Bournemouth fans need to be at their most vocal and their most supportive. And when you analyse the run that they had, a really bad run, let's not make no bones about it. The run after the World Cup was poor. But you also have to take into consideration the opponents you're playing, the fact that we haven't had the ability to strengthen the transfer window, the fact that there were huge injuries to key players, and a little bit of unluckiness in there as well. And it was like, well, hang on a second. All the messages I'm getting from the dressing room, from the training pitches, from around the club, they're all positive. They're all behind the manager. No one's not playing for Gary. Everyone thinks he's doing a really solid job. They're enjoying training. Tactically, he's very, very clever. He's very good. I'm hearing stuff from outside of people out there at the club as well that are saying good things about Gary O'Neill. I'm thinking, well, hang on a second. That doesn't marry up with what the Bournemouth fans feel. So, you need to be a little bit less critical and a little bit more supportive. And then, obviously let things breathe. Give him a chance with the window. Let him bring in the players he wants to bring in. Let the club work with the new owner in their first transfer window and see what happens. And sure enough, they go from the bottom of the Premier League to safety quite comfortably within 6 weeks. And, everyone looks back and goes, well, yeah, he's done an incredible job. But that said, he'll still face criticism, and all eyes will be on him at the start of next season to see how he gets on.
I think I got a little bit more of an insight than most Bournemouth fans of how Gary O'Neill operates, because back in September, and God bless his soul, Elgard, a very good friend, and it was something that Fletcher sorted out for me. He actually organised for Al to have a wander around Dean Court as well and go and meet all the players, watch a training session. And Gary O'Neill sat down with us for about 5-10 minutes, I would say, and talked about his philosophy. And it was before the Brentford game. And it was effectively, if Brentford do this, we do this. And he seemed so astute, so assured of what he was actually, his whole game plan. And I thought, he's thinking along the same wavelength as what Eddie did. And there were signs in him then of Eddie. Of course, he was a new manager, was learning his trade. But did you see that as well?
Yeah, that was one of the first things I got told from people that had worked with Gary, from people that had played with Gary in the latter stages of his playing career, was that he was very tactically astute. He was very clever with the game plans he came up with. I was being told by members of his family that he literally does not stop working. He gets home from training and he sits in front of the laptop and he's doing analysis and he's working out game plans and he's doing all of the things that most managers wouldn't do away from the training ground. He was giving, 12, 16 hours a day to the club and to the cause of trying to win games. Yeah. So therefore, I was hearing positive things about him, and I didn't hear, very little negatives. And that's why it came as a bit of a surprise that people were so vitriolic with their comments about him, and so unfair and nasty. Because hang on a second, that's not coming from a place of knowledge. That's coming from a place of social media and maybe watching the team on a match day. So yeah, of course, like we said, there were poor performances. There were matches where things weren't good enough, and it was difficult to see the identity. But the key thing in that situation was judge Gary when he's got his best team on the pitch. Judge Gary after a transfer window is first at the club, and judge Gary over a prolonged period of time where there's been some decent games, decent performances, and then you can make a judgment on him. And, Bournemouth fans need to rest assured that if Gary O'Neill is not doing a good job, the first people to know about it and the first people to make a change will be the board. That's what they do. They did not buy the football club thinking, well, it doesn't matter if we go down to the Championship. No, they bought the football club with huge ambitions and they wanted to be successful and achieve things. And therefore, if that meant making a change with the manager, I'm pretty certain they would have done that. But they were taking their time and doing things sensibly, not kind of shooting off at the hip and just making a rash decision after a poor result. They were letting things breathe. And then, obviously, they would have made their decision. Their decision was to carry on going with Gary, stick with him. They believed in what he was doing and what was happening in the training ground. And obviously, it came to fruition with 15th in the Premier League and 39 points.
It seemed to me that it was a vocal minority rather than the silent majority at Dean Court, because I did hear during games in that running, Leicester away for one. Of course, there were shouts of Gary O'Neill against Spurs as well. But there was, that vocal minority, I think, that was building that up. And some of the abuse he got was absolutely despicable. It doesn't represent our club. Of course, this shirt is everyone together. And the clown pictures, of course, there was even worse than that, the Osama bin Laden pictures as well. Do you feel that, the majority of Bournemouth fans were behind him throughout that running?
I don't honestly know. I don't use social media a great deal. I post stuff for work as and where appropriate. I try and keep Bournemouth fans up to date in the transfer window with accurate information. But I don't actively kind of engage with fans, forums and chats and all those kind of things. So I don't know how supportive. And like you say, it's always the vocal minority that seem to get the most attention. All I know is that off the back of the tweet I sent and the kind of the note I made, there was a lot of people that reached out to me to say that they agreed. And there were some people that didn't agree, and that's football. And I didn't do it for reaction. I didn't do it to upset people. I just wanted to make some people aware that it's not cool to abuse people. I get abused on social media every week, whether it's something I've said on Sky Sports or an opinion I've got or some information I've put out there or something I've said on air. People want to come onto social media and be nasty. And I just think, well, I don't understand that world. I don't understand, I don't watch TV and think, she's done a rubbish job. He's crap at his job. I don't agree with that opinion. I'm going to go and abuse that person on social media. Boom, boom, boom. You're a such and such. I don't live in that world, so I don't understand it. And I struggle to get my head around it. But I think, largely Bournemouth fans are aware of the club's position and what they're doing and where they're going. And, I think you just have to, judge the manager at the right times. Let's be honest. We will be judging Gary O'Neill next season. He's finished on 39 points and finished 15th in the Premier League. So the expectation now for Bournemouth fans would be, let's try and improve on that. And that's what I think. Let's try and improve. Every year, got to improve. Now, whether that's the position or the points tally or the number of goals scored or the goals conceded, whatever the things that you think are the things that we should be trying to attain, then that's fine. But don't judge Gary O'Neill after 2 games next season. Let's judge Gary O'Neill after 9 or 10 games. Let's get a quarter of the season out of the way, see where we're at, see how we're doing. And if things aren't going well, then of course you've got the right to turn around and say, well, hang on a second, this isn't going in the right direction. But you've got to give him that period of time. Let him have another transfer window, a pre-season, and then the opening games in the Premier League. And then after 7, 8, 9, 10 games, you can start to go, right, this is the Gary O'Neill Bournemouth side. I'm on board, or actually I'm struggling to identify with this team and we're not doing very well. We're in the bottom 3. We're not scoring goals. Maybe he's not the right man. But the key thing is in all of that, just give him time, take a step back, let it breathe, and then make your decision and judge people fairly.
Completely agree. Well, of course, you're going to be busy over the next couple of months because the transfer window is open and the rumour mill has already started. We've been linked, believe it or not, to Asmir Begovic today for a 3rd spell at the club. Nicolas Jackson's popped back up again, Villarreal. There's a lot of talk about Gnonto and Summerville from Leeds. Alex Scott, who's a Bristol City youngster, and then Robin Gosens as well, who is, of course, is at Inter Milan, played 14 minutes against Manchester City, who was previously at Atalanta as well. Is there any truth to all these rumours, or is it just does it just go crazy? And it a lot of these things are started by a man at the pub with his dog, who's talking with a group of mates and just think, oh well, he's going to be a good player. But where does all this come from, Mark?
I think naturally there will be, just say most Premier League clubs want to strengthen in 5 positions.
Yeah,
they will have probably 30 names.
Yeah.
They'll have number 1 target, number 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on and so forth. And what they will do is they will go out with their recruitment team and they will say, what's the deal? How much will he cost? What's the agency fee? What does he want every week? How long a contract does he want? And so on and so forth. They will collate that information. They will put it into their database, their forms, and then they will present it to the manager. And they will go, well, he's our number 1 target, but he's going to be really expensive. But our number 2 target is perhaps a little bit cheaper than we thought. This works out. But what they do is they reach out to these people, to the agents, to the players, to the clubs. They find out what the deal is, what the information is. And of course, an agent will then go, oh, I've had a phone call from Man United, Newcastle, Bournemouth and Luton. Right, let's get that out there because I want to sell my client. I want people to know that he's popular. I want to know, what deals are out there on the table. I want to flush out other football clubs. So then you get this kind of rumour mill that starts where the club will go out and find out, for example, what the deal is for maybe 6 goalkeepers, 8 goalkeepers, 10 goalkeepers.
Yeah.
And then they will come back together and they'll go, right, we can get rid of those 5, but these are the 5 that we'll focus on. And then they'll go from there. So that's sort of where things start from. Clubs just don't have 5 targets and go and get 5 targets. Mm-hmm. They'll have a list of targets in each position. And of course, financially, that will dictate a lot of what clubs can do. So they'll go through their targets and they'll go, well, we've got a number 1 target at left back. We've got a number 1 target up front. We've got our number 1 goalkeeping target. We've spent a lot of money to do that. So actually now we're going to have to go to our 3rd target as a right back because we've already used up a big chunk of our money. So it's just a big game of chess, basically. Yeah. So that's essentially what's happened now. No players, agents or clubs really are making a decision on their future right now. You know, if I'm a footballer and I'm out of contract, I'm not making a decision now. I'm going to turn around to my agent and I'm going to say, well, let's wait 2 or 3 weeks and let's see where we're at. Because why would I tie myself down to a club when there may be more money and a bigger club and European football 6 weeks down the line? So I'm happy with my position. I can wait and be patient and then go from there. So what you end up getting, and of course in the world of social media and the passion that fans have for transfer activity, transfer news and speculation, you just have this big cauldron of information going in and all sorts of stuff coming out. And, our transfer blog on skysports.com gets around 750,000 to 1 million unique visitors every single day. So that gives you an indication that, 1 million people just engaging with Sky Sports online want to know what's happening in the world of transfers. It's big business and a lot of money gets spent. And invariably, most of what gets said is crap. It doesn't come true. And the other thing is, like I've always said, I'd rather be accurate, and second than wrong and first. And also, you have to remember there are certain people within the media that don't have relationships with clubs, so they can put out whatever they want. It doesn't affect them. Doesn't matter. I don't want to upset anyone. I don't want to damage any contacts. Trust is such an important thing in football. So I'd always want to put the information out, but put it out at the right time. And there's nothing worse than maybe putting out some information about a player and then the deal's maybe at a precarious point and suddenly another football club comes in and then they lose the player. And then they turn around to you and say, well, Mark, if you hadn't put that all over Sky Sports, then that wouldn't have alerted the other club, or that wouldn't have changed the dynamic, or that other team wouldn't have offered him an extra £15,000 a week. So now we've lost him and we think it's your fault. So, let things happen organically. I know that there's an appetite and a thirst for this kind of information. There are certain people on social media that just chuck stuff out there. I could put a list of 30 names out there right now of players that potentially Bournemouth could be interested in, and I might get 4 or 5 of them right. And then I could turn around at the end of the window and said, yeah, I told you on June the 13th, that was it. See, that name there, I got it right, didn't I? Look at me first. Well, everyone can do that. You just, you shoot enough shots, you're going to hit something. I'd rather just wait, be patient, let things develop and try and bring accurate information, because for me and for Sky Sports, being accurate is far more important than being first and wrong.
That's what I've always said, is yourself and Chris Temple that the fans really need to listen to, because all this stuff that is online, I wouldn't be surprised if we signed none of these players that I just mentioned there, to be perfectly honest. And let's be fair, the players that we did sign during January, I didn't expect any of them to come, to be fair. And they just come out of the woodwork and we was pleasantly surprised by that. But of course, with regards to the transfer market, and of course, fans are going to be eager for a little bit of news. It's probably better to do the transfer. There's always this thing that teams want to be first, start getting players in through the door first. But surely it's better as well to leave it towards the end as well to determine, right, okay, see a couple of pre-season games and then pinpoint exactly where you need, because things are going to change. Of course, Lerma's gone now and Zemura, and Stanislas, of course, as well, who we'll come on to in a bit. But of course, those players need replacing and need replacing with sensible signings. Do you feel that it's better to get the business done earlier, or perhaps a little bit later once we've seen what the current squad have got?
Yeah, well, I'm kind of in the middle of that. I think that if you've got 2 or 3 targets that you genuinely believe are going to improve the squad next season and the first 11, go and get them. You know, if you believe that they're the right players for you, just go and get them. And then let things evolve naturally. Eddie Howe was always keen to get the business done nice and early, because on the 1st of July or whatever date it was, the players were due back in for pre-season training. He wanted the bulk of his squad in place, ready to go, because that 6-week period for him was vital to getting what he wanted out of the team in terms of fitness levels, in terms of the DNA, the footballing style, and just understanding the football club and what that season was about. So for Eddie, that was key for him. Gary O'Neill, again, is in a similar mould. He liked to work with the players on the training pitch over pre-season, really get into them, what he wants for them in terms of the style and the DNA of the club and the philosophy in terms of games and match days and all that kind of stuff. So it'd be very similar. It's obviously a bit of a tricky scenario because Bournemouth, Gary O'Neill is the head coach. You've got a really experienced sporting director in Richard Hughes, who obviously has been at the club for a number of years and understands what that club's about, working with Neil, obviously, on the contracts and the finance and doing the right deals for the football club. So it works slightly differently compared to when Eddie was involved heavily with recruitment. Now it's obviously sort of a team effort that they come together. So I think there'll be a little bit of work done early, and then they'll naturally and organically let things evolve and develop over the course of the window. Sometimes you get presented with things at the end of the window that you never really planned for. And perhaps if you spent all your money nice and early, then you'd be kicking yourself thinking, I know this happened a few years ago. It was a player that we got offered quite late on, but we'd already signed a couple of players in that position. And it became a little bit of a like, well, ooh, that's a shame. We couldn't fit him in now. Financially, it wouldn't quite work. But if we'd have known 6 weeks ago, we would have waited and done the deal. And that's one of the things. Sometimes you get things done nice and early and you save yourself a few quid before the market goes a bit manic. Sometimes you think, well, we should have been a little bit more patient. There's no right or wrong. I just think if you want to get the players in that you know are going to affect that 11, get them in early and then let the rest of the window unfold naturally.
And we've spoken before as well about how important Richard Hughes and Neil Blake are, and I think how undervalued they are by our fan base, really.
Well, I think you can only judge those two on the deals that they do, the players that they sign, the way that the football club is run, and what's happening. And right now I'm seeing, a team in the Premier League. Yeah. I'm seeing young players coming through the development squad. I'm seeing young, talented coaches working with these players, Tommy Elphick, Sean Cooper, Alan Connell, and so on and so forth down the pyramid. I'm seeing training ground ambitions, things being built. The club's trying to move into new academy category, which means they go to Cat 2, which means they get a better quality of opposition and better quality games. And of course, you judge them on the transfer windows that have gone by. I thought recently we've had some weaker transfer windows where players haven't been good, but you look at what happened. But obviously, there was under a different owner, so there are always reasons for why there isn't as much money spent or things done in a certain way. But you look at the last two windows: 6 players in January, 75 million quid spent. I think every single player had an impact in one form or another. Some of them were regular starters. Some of them were not as heavily involved, but they came into their own as the season progressed. Obviously, we didn't see much of Ilya, but he certainly started to look the part in the latter stages of the season. Unfortunately, Junior Traore had some injuries to contend with as well. Same with Dongo Watara. I know Randolph was very popular in and amongst the dressing room as well, and he's added to that department. So I think you look at that window and you go, this was really successful. This was great. This was a really strong window. And you look at the players that were key to the club at the end of the season as well, the likes of Neto, massively important, free transfer. Joe Rothwell in the summer, really, really strong end to the season after injury and looks so good as well. Free transfer. And the other players that they signed, Tavs, like, wow, how did we get him for 12 million quid or whatever it was we paid for him in the end? Like, what a player he'll be, so you've got that. So you're starting to look at it and you think, well, actually, that was two really strong windows by the football club. The free transfers and the activity that was done in the summer looked fantastic. Added to the money spent and the players that came in January. And you've had two really strong windows there and a really good foundation. And the most exciting thing for me is you're watching a lot of young players there. So they've got time to improve and grow and develop and get better. And also we know that we need to make money. Bournemouth is not going to be a Premier League side that players come to and think, well, I'll stay here for the rest of my career. They'll all think this is a stepping stone for me to move on to a bigger club in the Premier League. And like we did with Aaron Ramsdale and Nathan Aké and Callum Wilson, if we can develop these players, get the very best out of them and sell them on for a healthy profit that can be reinvested into new young players, then for me, that is like golden ticket. That's what we want to achieve. That's what we should be trying to do. Be as competitive as we can, play the best football and develop young players and make money and be a really sound business and continue to grow this legacy. Then I think that would be massively successful for this football club.
Yep, most definitely. Most definitely. In your honest opinion, where is it that we need to strengthen on the pitch? I've got a couple of ideas myself, but where do you feel, from watching the side all season, where do you think we need players in?
Well, it's a difficult one to answer, is that everyone could say every position, you could argue. I certainly feel, it's difficult because I don't want to upset players if they're watching. But I think Dom's been brilliant. I really think Dom's all-round game has improved this season. I think his work off the ball during the campaign was tremendous. I think the way he ran into the channels, he pulled defenders around, he worked really hard. I know ultimately he'll be judged on goals, and he didn't get as many goals as perhaps he would have liked. But I've been really impressed with him. I think it'd be great to see a striker like Cal who can get 15, 20 goals in the top flight. I think if we can find that type of player, that would be brilliant. Obviously, we potentially need a fullback, having lost Jack Stacey, and obviously Jay-Z. So maybe a right back and a left back on either side. They could be players that we're looking at. Obviously, we know Smithy's coming towards the end of his best years. What a player he's been for the club. I still think he's got a massive role to play. He's a great character in the dressing room. We know that he's got a lot to offer as well. But I think to rely on him for 38 Premier League games might be tough for his body. But he definitely needs to be around it. And if we can find a young Adam Smith, then I think that would be brilliant. And again, maybe through the middle, obviously, to replace Jefferson, someone who can be that midfield pivot, someone that can pick up the ball, can break things up, can play, wants to get forward, score goals, be a physical presence. Then that would be a key position. Obviously, maybe at the goalkeeper. Obviously, Neto's here for some time yet. We know that because of the contract he signed. I don't think Mark Travers will want to stay on the bench. I think he's a young lad. He needs to play. Yeah. He needs to get out on loan, get another 40, 50 games under his belt, and that will do him the world of good. So I think that those types of things are important. And then maybe an advanced midfielder. There may be one or two tweaks and changes that come our way. Maybe there may be one or two players out of the academy and the development squad that might be flirting in and around it. I've seen a couple of matches, Hampshire Senior Cup games and various other matches where you look at players and you think, well, yeah, he's almost ready for that sort of step up. He's getting closer to it. And I think it's important that we continue to allow young players to develop. Look at Jay-Z, look at Jaden Anthony, look at the opportunities that they've been given and how well they've done. And I think that's important for our club. So, yeah, I think we've got an exciting time ahead. I think this could be a good window. I know that Bill Foley wants to continue to support Richard O'Neill in the transfer window. He wants to invest again. He wants to bring the right type of players into the football club. Obviously, they have to do it sensibly and sustainably as well. They can't just go and spend another 100 million or whatever and go, yeah, let's crack on. We still have to be conscious that the most important thing next season is to finish 17th or higher. That's number one, because that will enable the club to continue to grow off the pitch. Premier League money means a training ground development can continue. It means a new stadium on the horizon potentially can continue. When that big chunk of cash comes in for staying in the top flight, then that keeps everything else moving in the right direction as well. So for me, next season, let's make sure we finish 17th or higher, get another set of money from the top flight, and then that can continue to develop and grow the club in the way that we'd like to. So I think it'll be an exciting window. I think there'll be a lot of things happening. There's a lot of clubs that want to be active, and I think Bournemouth will most certainly be one of those sides that want to improve and want to build upon the incredible season they had last campaign and where they finished 39 points, and right, let's try and better it now.
So of course, with the players leaving, Jefferson Lerma was, of course, the big name that left the club. And again, there was a lot of rumours circulating around, and there was mentions of him going to Spain. But going to Crystal Palace was an interesting one because, of course, Jefferson's English is fairly limited. I think it's fair to say that. And of course, I believe his wife is Spanish as well, isn't she? Was you surprised by the move to Crystal Palace? And do you think that because I thought that being similar sort of clubs, I thought, why is he left here to go to there?
Yeah, I'm as surprised as every Bournemouth fan. I think I'm as surprised as everyone at the club. I didn't see that coming. I genuinely thought he'd probably go back to La Liga. I know that the club made, numerous offers to try and keep Jefferson and provide him and his family with the right assurances that he needed, and give him the financial rewards that he felt he deserved. I think the offer, from the club was a very, very good one. And I don't quite understand why he's chosen Crystal Palace. Great club, great fans. Love Crystal Palace fans. They're brilliant, really passionate. I love going to Selhurst Park. But again, I don't understand it. And like we were saying earlier on in the season, if I'm Jefferson Lerma, I'm saying to my agent, well, hang on, I'm a free transfer. I can get a big signing on fee. I can get decent wages. I can play in the top flight of any division in Europe pretty much. So I'm just going to enjoy my summer. I'm going to keep myself fit, and I'm going to wait and just see how things unfold, because there may be a really big side that look at him and go, he could be a really good squad player. He can start games, but also he fits into our price bracket for a squad player. And I'm talking top six. I'm talking one of the big clubs could turn around and say, well, yeah, Jefferson Lerma, we don't see him starting every single game, but we know that he can start in the Premier League. But, what an asset to have in the squad, because, top six players, cost 150 a week, maybe, in and around that. And Jeff wouldn't be anywhere near that. So to get a player on a free transfer that's played in the Premier League, so that sort of surprises me, the timing of it, the nature of the signing. I think I'm pretty certain, I don't know for a fact, but I'm pretty certain the Bournemouth offer would have almost been identical, if not better, than Crystal Palace's. So I guess the opportunity to live in London for his family, maybe. But yeah, don't know what to say about it. I was surprised as everyone else.
It was bizarre because I thought he was going back to La Liga, and he's going with my best wishes, because he had the opportunity when we were relegated out the Premier League. He had the opportunity to leave the club, and he helped get the club back into the Premier League, unlike a couple of players. I won't mention any names, but the thing is, he fought to get the club back here. And that stands for a lot, but it was just the nature and who he's gone to, really, which was a complete shock. Of course, Zemura is another one who is off, and this for me was really, really disappointing at the time. But it felt more the club, the Italian club Udinese, who was announcing it more than Jordan was.
Yeah, again, another one. I think ultimately, and this is the nature of football. These players have very, very short careers, and trust me, I've seen players get treated very badly by clubs, and the fans don't kick up a fuss. The fans only kick up a fuss when the player wants to do themselves a favour and get a better club and move on for more money. And the fans don't like that, but they don't seem to worry too much when they get the clubs treat the players badly. So you have to understand this is a business for them. This is work. This is money. This is their livelihood. This is their families. So I have no problem ever really with a player departing. And Jefferson goes with, funny enough, the best wishes of every single Bournemouth fan. I think he's one of those few players that will get cheered when he comes to Vitality next season. Before the game, they adore him. They love him. He gave everything. He stayed for the championship campaigns, got themselves back up. He moves on as a free transfer. The contract came to an end. There's nothing wrong with that. Players don't have to stay, don't have to sign on. I don't think he was a minute's problem. I don't think he ever put in a transfer request. I don't think he ever caused issues off the pitch. He always turned up. He knew he was potentially leaving and still played in the last few Premier League games and gave everything. So therefore, you have no issues there. Jay-Z, again, I think this was slightly different set of circumstances. I'm surprised that the changes he's decided to make. An opportunity to play in Serie A for a young lad. Wow, that's incredible. You don't get those moments, going to Inter, going to AC, same stadium, Roma, Juventus. These are big, big names. And what an opportunity for a young lad to go to a different country, learn a new language, and take on that challenge. So I'm absolutely, buzzing in that respect. I felt like he probably, should have stayed at Bournemouth, should have signed a contract a long time ago and continued his development. But for whatever reason, it didn't feel right for him. No problem. He moves down to the 23s. He carries on playing with them until the summer and then moves on. But again, great lad, great character. Will always be very, very fondly remembered for that campaign, getting out at the Championship. Yeah. Fair play to the lad. I wish him all the best. He was a really nice lad. Never saw him and Jaden. They were, as thick as thieves, always together. They were always pleasant, polite, respectful, friendly, kind, shake your hand, say hello, give you an interview, and no issues with that whatsoever. Slightly surprised, but also excited for him because he's got an incredible opportunity at his age to go and try something completely new, and then maybe one day he'll be back in the Premier League.
No, fair enough. And to be honest, like I say, I think it was more the club that, putting it out and announcing it during the season, which I think upset the fans more than Jordan Zemura actually, because of course he retweeted it as soon as it went up. At the end of the day, like you say, he's a young lad and, he's got to do what's best for him. But one player I'm actually really sad to see leaving the club, Junior Stanislas, after all his years of service, getting us out of the Championship the first time round, being a big part of that, and then subsequent years in the Premier League, scored some. To be honest, Stanislas never scored a poor goal. He always scored worldies, didn't he?
Yeah.
What do you think the future holds for him now?
I think he's just got to find a happy place. I think Junior's one of those footballers that unfortunately has been let down by his body. I cannot sit here and say enough nice things about Junior Stanislas. He is one of football's good guys. Yeah. He's such a warm gentleman, proper player, technically so good. He gave so much to the club, had been on the whole journey, right from, 2014-15 Championship campaign, getting into the Prem, staying there, utter moments of brilliance. Some of his free kicks, some of his goals, some of his impact substitutions, some of the things he did on the ball. But most importantly, the person he was off the pitch. If you had a daughter and she brought him home, you'd be well happy because he's a proper man. He's a proper good guy. I love spending time with him. I have so much respect for him. I really hope he can find a club that he can continue to play and develop. I hope his body can hold out for a few more years and can give him, another 100 games in professional football, because there's no question he's got the ability technically. I absolutely adore the bloke, and there will never be a player. He's one of the original kind of good gang. That team: Matty Ritchie, Mark Pugh, Charlie Daniels, Simon Francis, Tommy Elphick, Stephen Cook. I'm going to miss someone out. Callum Wilson, Harry, Drew Sermon. That group. He is a very big, firm part of that era and that dynasty and that group that took us to places at the time that we'd never been before.
Yeah.
And he will go down in history as being one of the good guys. It's sad, really sad that it's come to an end. But it was inevitable. And I just hope he can stay fit and just, his body gives him a bit more, because he's one of my favourites. And I don't have many of those, but he was one of the good ones.
And of course, Jack Stacey is also leaving the club as well. And he was always a true professional when he come on. And, when he started a lot of games when Smithy was injured, do you feel that maybe, and this was something that did go through my mind, because Smithy, is coming towards the end of his career. Hopefully he has got quite a while left with us. But I thought Stacey staying might have made a bit of sense.
Yeah, I think Jack needed to play football. I think
Yeah.
Jack, again, has been a huge part of the squad recently. Never got as many games as perhaps he'd have liked. No question about his ability in the Championship, and perhaps could have been better in the Prem if he'd got a consistent run of games and got more minutes on the pitch. But again, whenever I saw him around the training ground on a match day, really good guy. Always stop for a chat. Always, be pleasant and around you. He was another one I look back on and think, he could have, perhaps we expect a little bit more from him. Felt he developed in a slightly different way. I think he was naturally seen as the long-term successor for Smithy, but it never quite worked out that way. But I still, it's not to say that he didn't do well for the club. He was brilliant, never let them down, gave everything, good trainer, good guy. And he needs to play football, and he's got an opportunity at Norwich now. So, that's a club that have got big ambitions to get back into the Premier League. So I think, that could be a good spot for him to continue his career. And I wish him all the best. These are all good guys. That's the one good thing that is important for Bournemouth's recruitment. They sign the right characters and the right personalities. And I think that's what you're seeing from all the players that have come in, and certainly the ones that have departed.
And I think that's a great move, actually, for Jack Stacey to go
Yeah.
to Norwich. I think, they're going to be a club that are going to be right in there, right in the mix. And, I'm sure he'll get quite a lot of game time. They've been very successful. One thought as well was that maybe because Bournemouth have been linked to Max Aarons before, maybe then, that could be something that could sweeten the deal, so to speak. Is that something that is possible?
I guess it's possible. Max Aarons is one of those players that had been watched from the age 16, 17, 18, 19. A lot of clubs were interested in him. There's a lot of talk about big money moves away from Norwich City.
Yeah.
Barcelona at one stage inquired as to his availability. They wanted to take him on loan, but Norwich City said, no, we're not really interested in loaning out one of our best players. But again, probably stayed at Norwich a bit too long, hasn't developed in the way that perhaps everyone expected him to. And he will probably say this is now the right opportunity for him to get his new chance, a new start, fresh start somewhere at a new club, new manager, new training ground, new facilities, new set of fans to take him on the next part of his journey. But I could see why Bournemouth would potentially be interested in him, but I don't know if they are or not. And that's me being honest.
No,
exactly. He'd certainly fit the bill in one respect. Don't know any information on that one.
No, fair enough. And of course, we had quite a lot of players out on loan. The likes of Kilkenny, Dembele as well. Got a lot of time for Dembele. But do you feel that those players on loan will be loaned out again? Or do you think that some of them might be integrated into the first team? Because, Ben Pearson, for example, got some game time at the start of the season. And I think he offers something a little bit different. And now Jefferson's left. If we don't replace Jefferson in time for the start of the season, do you feel that maybe he might come back into the fold?
Well, I think you start on the first day of pre-season with a clean slate. I think the manager in his mind will have kind of a vision of what players he wants to keep, what players will need to go, what players that the club need to offload for financial reasons as well. You know, you don't want to have big earners sat around in the development team playing, you know, games that aren't, you know, important for the first team. And of course, you don't want people to be unhappy. You know, players are human beings, and they need to be in a place where they're comfortable. And if they're not in the match day squad on a Saturday and they're sat in the stands, that's not good for their mental health. And, you know, it's not good for the bank balance if, you know, we're paying them to sit in the stands. So I think there's always a bit of, you know, needs to be a bit of joined up thinking about what's the right thing to do with each player, what's, you know, and there'll be players that come back into pre-season that you didn't expect to be in amongst it. And they're really fit. They're ready to go. They look sharp. They have a couple of really promising games. And the manager says, well, I want you a part of my squad. If you're going to play like this, then you're going to be in my thinking. So I think there's always that blank canvas on the first day of pre-season, and it's up to the players to try and change the mind of the manager. And obviously the club will work in the background to try and find the right opportunities should they present them to players that they don't see in their long-term plan. And I think that's just one of those things that happens. You bring players in with a view that player will be good for us, and it just doesn't work out. That player can develop and that player won't. And it's just, you know, every single signing in the transfer window, every single thing you do in terms of football is a gamble, you know, whether it's tactics or players, formations, and you just have to try and limit that gamble to be less of a gamble. But sometimes things just don't work out. That's just the way that they, you know, the things unfold. So it's just a case of waiting to see how they come back. And then, of course, what's right for the players individually and what's right for the club.
We did mention it earlier on, and I guess FFP is becoming something that is being highlighted in the Premier League. Of course, there's a situation at Manchester City, not sure what's happening there, but there's also a big situation at Everton around FFP. And one big concern for me is how far away or how much have we got to play with in that scope? Have we got quite some way to go? Have we got quite some leniency around that? Or is it going to be quite tight? We have to do, you know, play within a certain field. Now Bill Foley's on board and can pump money in. Is it still a case that we've got to be so careful?
I don't honestly know Bournemouth's situation. I don't think, because of the nature of the way FFP works, it's done in what's called a 3-year cycle.
Yeah.
So, you know, the money you can spend is calculated over 3 years worth of turnover. There are lots of factors involved in that. And therefore you kind of have to fall into those parameters. Obviously, with the club staying in the Premier League for a second season, you know, finishing bottom of the Premier League's worth about 120, 130 million alone, not taking into consideration, you know, ticket sales and commercial activity and other things that go on in and around the club. So I don't know, but offhand, Bournemouth's turnover is probably something between 115 and 175 million pound a year. So I think you can go to a certain percentage of that turnover. So loose maths, you can start to work out that Bournemouth can probably spend, I don't know, whatever, 150 million a year. I think something like that. So let's be honest, we spent 25, 30 million in January, 75 in the summer. Sorry, 25, 30 in the summer, 75 in January. And bearing in mind, this is the other thing as well that makes it a bit of a funny scenario. Just because you pay whatever, I'm trying to think of Tavernier, for example, £12.5 million for him. That isn't £12.5 million. There you go, Middlesbrough. That's your money. Bomb. It will be maybe £3 million now, £3 million in 12 months, so on and so forth, etc., etc., etc. Yeah. So that will obviously come into that financial period for the FFP. You don't necessarily, just because Bill Foley committed £75 million in January, doesn't mean that there was £75 million going out of the club during that time. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah,
no, that makes a lot more sense to me.
So yeah, you can actually go, well, actually, I don't think Bournemouth's FFP rules will affect them considerably during this summer window, because they'd have to spend a huge chunk of money, 100 million plus, to worry about that. So I think they can be a little bit more clever with what they do and how they do it. But you need to speak to a proper football finance man to get the intricacies of how that all works. I have a very, very loose understanding of FFP, but it's not an issue as far as I'm concerned. But again, alternatively, and this is something I've said before, if Bournemouth were to go and spend 200 million this summer, I'd be a little bit worried. I don't want Bournemouth to go and just splash the cash and pay people £150,000 a week and let's go for it. I'd much rather that the money was invested in the training ground and the stadium, and on young players that potentially we could sell and make money on. And that was something that Maxim had. One of his philosophies was, I can pay £20 million for a player and I can sell him for 40 or 20 or 10 and get some money back. But if I pay a player 150 grand a week, I don't ever get that money back. That money's gone. So I think the club will be sensible, as they always have done in the window. So therefore, I don't think the FFP stuff will be too much of an issue. Obviously, I think FFP's wages go into that money as well. So it's a very complicated thing, and that's a really hashed up rubbish answer.
Do you know what, Mark? It's a lot better than the answer that I would give, because my maths is absolutely atrocious. I wouldn't be able to tell you. Maybe Sam. That's why Sam's so good. Is he can explain it a little bit more to me, but still, that was a really good answer. No, thank you, mate. Of course, Everton though are subject to all this, and hopefully, touch wood, we won't be in that relegation battle. It's likely that we possibly could be, but Everton, of course, could well be deducted points because of their situation.
Yeah.
With that in mind, and the three teams that have come up, to be fair, I'm starting to feel quite confident about this season going into it already. I know it's only June, but I'm actually quite confident going into this season, because Luton, of course, done fantastically, but are going to have to really spend to improve their team. Sheffield United, you could probably make an answer the same. Burnley, seem to be quite strong, but of course, if Everton get deducted points, and they're already not particularly the strongest team in the Premier League, we could probably rest a little bit easier going into this season.
I certainly feel like I know the direction you headed in, and it's difficult to not agree, really. I spoke to the Luton Town chairman at Wembley in the mix zone by the tunnel, and I said, what's the plan for the transfer window? What's the plan for next season? He said, we won't be spending huge sums of money. This is a bank. This is a banking situation that is going to, bankroll a new training ground, a new stadium, and keep this club going for many, many years. And it was sort of almost quite refreshing to hear that. They will get sucked into spending some money, and they will have to, improve on the wages and do things. But I think a big chunk of their money will be ring-fenced for a future legacy. So therefore, naturally, even if Luton spent 100 million in the transfer window, they would find next season tough, because they haven't been in the top flight for however many years, 30 odd years. They were unfortunately one of the sides that signed the declaration to be a part of this new Premier League and got relegated the season before it kicked in.
Yeah.
So you naturally say Luton will be down there. The same with Sheffield United. They've got big financial problems at the moment. Players potentially departing, new ownership on the horizon, but that seems to have gone very quiet, and that's taken a long time. They were under a transfer embargo for big sections of last season. So that's another issue that they're going to have to contend with, and it'll be tough to compete for them. Burnley, I think, will be slightly different. I think they've got a manager who's probably one of the hottest prospects outside of the top flight, or now in the top flight in world football. And there will be a lot of big clubs that are watching how he gets on. They're already in pre-season action. Everton potentially, of course, could struggle. I'm not so sure about the points deduction. That could come in, 2 years' time. It could be a financial, penalty as opposed to a numerical, points deduction. But you certainly, you can find 2 or 3 or 4 clubs that you think potentially should be beneath Bournemouth. But the one caveat to that is everyone thought Bournemouth would be 20th last season. Everyone thought that they would be rubbish and they'd struggle and they'd get the lowest points total ever. And then guess what happened? 15th and 39. So, write these sides off at your peril. But I genuinely believe that there is, a good reason for optimism. If we can show the type of form early on that we did in our spell between March and April, and we can continue to develop, sign the right players, then, yeah, you would be looking at it going, we can be optimistic that we could have another season, a third season in the Premier League in our second spell. So, yeah, I get your sort of mindset and your thinking. Yeah. It just certainly feels like it might be, kind of a bottom 4 or 5, a middle chunk and then the top 8. But hopefully Bournemouth can be in that middle chunk and not be in a relegation battle.
You mentioned there, Mark, as well, with regards to Luton and their legacy. Of course, the training ground is being sorted now at Camford Magna. It's looking really, really good, and some pictures are being sent out of that. I think probably there is going to be attention now on the stadium or the future of Dean Court. And for me, I'll be gutted to leave the current stadium, getting promoted to the Premier League, working our way up, 5 great seasons before relegation, which was quite sad during COVID. And it would be nice to build on that. And I spoke to Eddie Mitchell quite some time ago, and I understand we could redevelop it up to around about the 20,000 mark.
Yeah.
But do you feel that Bill Foley is going to look at maybe moving the club out of the current stadium, maybe not very far? There's been rumours, and again, it's all rumours, about the car park and over the current training ground. Do you feel that might be the way he goes, so it's a ground which can be expandable as the club grows?
Yeah, so I think there's all cards are on the table. Do you try and buy back a stadium that you sold for £3.5 million, however many years ago, 15 odd years ago now, can't remember the exact time. Do you try and buy that back and develop that? But there's obviously restrictions because you don't have a lot of room behind the east stand. You don't have a lot of room behind the north stand. The south stand you can develop and build. The main stand's pretty much what it is. So, or do you take all the money you spend on developing that and buying that back and just go, right, let's start from scratch. Let's build something now. So I think, I think they're exploring every option. What is the best financially? I love the fact that, you're in Kings Park and, you've sort of got, community around you. You Folkestone Station and Bournemouth Station, and you can walk down Holdenhurst, and you've got the park and you've got schools and houses, and you've got a bit of character, because those stadiums that are just in the middle of nowhere are just soulless.
Oh, yeah.
I just, and I understand you've got 100+ years of history at Dean Court that you just don't want to say goodbye to. I just think the most important thing is we just get it right for the future of the football club. We want kids to be able to come and watch Bournemouth play week in, week out. So we need more seats. We need more corporate hospitality. We need to continue to develop the club. We can't do that where we are at the moment. So it has to move on. But again, it's that catch-22. You need to be in the Premier League, really, to spend 100 odd million on a new stadium. But you drop down, then how does that affect it, and so on and so forth. I know that Bill has huge, massive ambitions for the club. He wants to do the right thing. He wants to be someone that takes it to a new place. He wants to develop it and build it and leave a legacy. And that ultimately will involve a new stadium. But I still think they're at the early stages of, you know, the athletics track and all that sort of stuff. And people talk about Herne and Ringwood and so on and so forth, and other places potentially where you could take the stadium to. But I still think that's some way off. I think the most important thing at the minute, let's get the training ground done. Let's get that as a, you know, top class, world class facility that people want to come to Bournemouth because they can see they're going to develop as players because of the facilities, that training ground. When that's sorted, then they can start to go, right, let's look at other things. Let's now address the stadium and let's see what the right thing to do is. But there were games at the back end of last season where you could have got tickets for, you know, they weren't sold out.
Yeah.
So, you know, people can't say they want a bigger stadium and a new stadium when you don't, you know, sell out Dean Court. So it's that balance of getting things done in the right way. But it's the young generation, it's the Bournemouth fans of tomorrow that we need to be able to get into that stadium now so they can start their journey as Bournemouth fans like me and you did many, many years ago.
You probably can remember, actually, with regards to, because we got quite a big catchment area. If you look at the whole of Somerset, you could say that we might even be able to grab a couple of fans off Southampton's patch now. Now they're down, but they used to always do it to us. I remember seeing the Daily Echo, and there was adverts to go to St Mary's in there. How big is that going to be for this football club to tap into those markets where we haven't, and how do we do that?
Well, you know, ultimately, young players are going to want to play at the biggest club they can with the best facilities. You know, if you know, if you've got kids who are 10 years old and they're being given the opportunity to play for Bournemouth's academy or Southampton's academy, they're going to choose Southampton's because of the facilities, because of the size of the club, because of the history, because of what's going on. That's just natural. But by building the training ground, developing the academy, and putting yourselves in the better facilities, that will make that decision a more difficult decision for young families. But of course, the club wants to expand. It needs to, you know, develop and find the best players and the best coaches and stretch their net as far as they possibly can to as many different locations as they can to attract players and develop players and so on and so forth. I think, you know, ultimately Southampton will always be a bigger club, certainly for the next few years. I think the size of a club can really only be determined on, you know, the club's history, the size of the fan base, the average gates, you know, the turnover of the club. So that, you know, they're the things that can constitute whether you're a big or medium or small club. So I think we're in a bigger division than them. So we've got to aim to be the number one club on the South Coast. We've got to aim to be that side that people want to play for, want to be a part of, and continue to grow and develop.
And pulling those fans in from those areas, I'm guessing we're going to have to get, and that's something I think that Jim Frivola is going to be imperative behind, you know, to actually tap into those markets, you know, across Somerset, for example, to actually get more fans down to games, so it does justify a bigger stadium.
Yeah, absolutely. Jim has been outstanding off the field in reaching out to the fan base, being interactive on social media, developing the club commercially, being that link between Neil and Richard and Bill and Bill's team. And he's come over and he's been a breath of fresh air. And I love some of the things I'm hearing about him and what he's doing around the club. And he's really trying to make Bournemouth a better place to be around and to go to on a match day. I think that's what we need. Those kind of people, those characteristics and those kind of characters is what Bournemouth's about. Those kind of open book people and people that just want to be a part of the community. You see his family are over, his kids are over. That's what we are about. That is what this club is built on. And I think Jim's exciting. I think Bill's exciting. The experience we've got from the guys that have been in and around it for a number of years. There's a really good mix of people at the heart of our club now. And I'm genuinely excited about the future. And Bournemouth fans should be as well. You know, this is a good time. This is a new era. We've had the Maxim Demin years that have been some of the most exciting in the club's history ever. And let's hope that the Bill Foley years can be even more exciting. And I'm excited to be on the Bournemouth train to see where it takes us. There'll be bumps in the road, no question about that. But I think everyone at the top of the club has got the ambitions and the collective exciting thought processes that need to happen there to hopefully start something that we'll look back on in 5 or 10 years' time and go, what about that for a journey?
Yeah, no, most definitely. And there's always that nervousness when you've got a fantastic owner like Maxim Denim, who has taken the club through so many steps of the ladder to get us into the Premier League, and then somebody else takes over, because you've seen clubs being taken over. For example, Leeds fans aren't particularly happy with their owners, well, until they've recently been bought out. Of course, there's all the stories about Manchester United and the Glazers. And further down the pyramid as well, you look at Birmingham and the situations that they had. But I get a genuine feel that Bill Foley and the team, want just the very, very best for Bournemouth. And I think we're lucky again in that sense.
Definitely. I think we've been lucky, really, really lucky. I don't think, there's not many fans in the country that could have the type of transition from one owner who is incredibly successful to another owner who's been successful in a short space of time as well. And you always worry about ownership. You look at Wigan or Reading, or, there's clubs there, fans there that are going through the mill, and they're worried about, and Southend and so on and so forth, that are worried about the existence of their club. And we're not worrying about our existence. We're worrying about how far up the Premier League we can finish. So I think that's testament to Bill Foley and the people that we've got at the club, that have, kept that club running through the relegation to the Championship. The club's sustainable. It's making money. It's not losing huge amounts of money. They're operating in a safe and sound manner. And I think that's all we could ever hope for.
Well, thank you so much again, Mark, for coming on the show, and hopefully, fingers crossed, a very, very exciting year to come. No doubt you're going to be reporting on lots and lots of transfer activity, but there's going to be loads of stories coming out and loads of rumours that we need not pay much attention to, isn't there, as well, from other outlets, shall we say. But do tell us as well what you're up to during the summer, because it doesn't stop, does it really?
No, non-stop. No, I'm off to Malta for a couple of days with England, and then up to Old Trafford for the second Euro qualifying match against North Macedonia. So I've got a bit of international duty over the next week or so. Then the transfer window will be in full swing. Pre-season campaigns will start beginning of July. The window will roll on, and then the fixtures are out this week. It'll be non-stop, and then you'll catch your breath at some stage in September with the first international break. So busy summer ahead, and hugely excited for another campaign at Sky covering the beautiful game, the game that I love so much, and lucky to be closely associated with Bournemouth, watching things unfold day to day. So exciting times ahead.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you again, Mark, and no doubt we'll catch up with you very soon.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, guys. Cheers.
Cheers, mate. And thank you, everybody, for joining us on this show. Please remember to hit the like, the subscribe, and the bell button below to be alerted to any new videos we do here on Up the Cherries in all departments. Please do check out our previous interviews. You'll be able to find them all on this channel. We'll also be doing a lot more content during the summer as well, so hit that subscribe button and you'll be alerted to anything we do. But until the next video, up the cherries, and we'll see you in the next one. Thank you for joining us.